From WHYY in Philadelphia, I'm Terry Gross with Fresh Air. Today, how Koch Industries and brothers Charles and David Koch vastly expanded their fortune by buying many other companies and creating a powerful political influence network to support their business goals. Koch Industry owns companies that make products you wouldn't associate with the Kochs because the Koch name isn't on them.
Koch Industries probably had a hand in making the wall panels I'm looking at right now. The lights are on. Koch probably played at some level in the business of delivering the electricity that is making that happen. The clothing I'm wearing has items from Koch in it.
We talk with business journalist Christopher Leonard, author of the new book Kochland. Leonard says Charles Koch has had some success reshaping the Republican Party to suit the needs of Koch Industries. But now Trump is a threat to that vision. The Koch brothers, Charles and David, are famous for the wealth they've amassed through Koch Industries. Together, they're worth more than $100 billion. And for creating a powerful political influence network. The network is designed to amplify messages pushed by Koch Industries, support legislation that favors Koch's needs and goals, and defeat legislation that stands in the way of Koch profits. Koch has used this network to prevent or try to dismantle regulations that affect the businesses. Koch Industries has its roots in the fossil fuel industry, and the Kochs have fought against regulating greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. Charles Koch has even tried to remake the Republican Party, according to the new book Kochland, The Secret History of Koch Industries and Corporate Power in America. My guest is the author, Christopher Leonard. He's a business reporter who covered agribusiness for the AP from 2005 to 2012. Christopher Leonard, welcome to Fresh Air. A lot of people have focused on the politics of the Koch brothers. The large part of your book is focused on the business end of the Koch brothers, how they built their fortunes, the ways they manipulated politics to enlarge their fortune. So I want to start by talking with you about the business end of Koch Industries. Why did you want to focus on that part?
What drew me to this corporation was the realization that the story of Koch Industries over the last 50 years really is a history of American capitalism during that time. You can explore our entire economy by telling the story of this one corporation. And the reason for that is because Koch Industries is really the hidden giant of the American economy. This is a massive company whose annual revenues are larger than that of Facebook, Goldman Sachs, and U.S. Steel combined. And it's not just the size of Koch that makes it important. It's the company's reach into our daily lives. This is a firm that specializes in the kinds of businesses that are vital to modern civilization, the kind of businesses you couldn't boycott even if you wanted to. Koch refines and sells the gasoline people use to drive to work. It makes the building materials and the walls and structures of our houses and offices. It makes the clothing materials and diapers and lycra, spandex. It's one of the world's largest producers of nitrogen fertilizer, which is one of those products that nobody thinks they really use. But nitrogen fertilizer is the bedrock of our modern food system, so you use it indirectly if you eat. This company is spread throughout our entire economic system. And for that reason, when you talk about Koch Industries, you're talking about our whole economy. You're talking about blue-collar manufacturing workers who've watched their labor unions get torn apart and who are earning less money today than they were in the 1980s in some cases. You're talking about private equity deal makers, for example, who work at Koch and who are out there looking for smaller companies to buy, which they load up with debt and then cut costs and increase production. And finally, you're talking about one of the largest corporate lobbying operations in the United States. I think a corporate influence machine that's really unrivaled by any corporate America and shines light on this fact that corporations have this level of influence over our public policy and our laws that they haven't had in 100 years.
Now, you said we couldn't boycott these products even if we wanted to because they're so embedded in the infrastructure. But also, like, Koch's name isn't on most of the products that it makes. For example, Koch owns Georgia Pacific, which makes, the products that it makes includes like paper plates and tissues, paper towels. but at the same time, it's a huge, like wood and pulp industry.
That's exactly right. I'm sitting here in a studio. Koch Industries probably had a hand in making the wall panels I'm looking at right now. The lights are on. Koch probably played at some level in the business of delivering the natural gas, the electricity that is making that happen. The clothing I'm wearing has items from Koch in it. This is an omnipresent firm. You just don't see the brand name on it.
Since Koch Industries has taken over, bought so many other companies, and its reach is so far now, is the word conglomerate an adequate word to describe Koch Industries? I couldn't think of a word that really described what I was reading about in your book.
I think conglomerate is a good way to get at it, but the term I use is a private equity firm, and this really reflects what's going on in the American economy today. You know, you've heard about these private equity companies. What they are is just a big pool of capital. I think of Koch Industries as a giant pool of money that is looking to invest itself and reinvest itself constantly to boost long-term profitability. So this is a firm always looking to acquire, expand, reinvest, and grow. And it transforms. I mean, the Koch industry that exists today in 2019 is very different from the Koch industries that existed in the year 2000. You see some of the same skeletal framework that's always going to be there: large oil refineries, large commodities operations, but the company is always changing and growing.
One of the things that enabled Koch Industries to grow is that it refused to be taken public. In 1981, Morgan Stanley wanted to take it public, to put it on the exchange, open it up for shareholders. And Charles Koch refused to do that. Why did he decline, and what were the advantages of staying a private company?
So the prologue of the book is called The Fighter. And that's really how I've come to see Charles Koch. Charles Koch has a very specific vision of how a corporation should be run. And I should point out, Charles Koch has been CEO of Koch Industries for 50 years, more than 50 years. He got the job when Lyndon Johnson was president. And Charles Koch is determined to run his company with a long-term strategic horizon. That is absolutely key to this company's strategic DNA, is thinking over the long term. And, you know, as you say, back in the 1980s, it would have been common sense for Koch Industries to go public. That's what a lot of companies did at the time. And when those bankers flew from New York to Wichita and pitched Charles Koch the option of going public, he could have earned millions of dollars overnight in payments for doing that, but he refused, because he knew that in going public, he would all of a sudden become made subject to these very short-term incentives. You know, public companies are on this treadmill of looking at their performance over the next 3 months. So much energy of corporate leaders and investors is focused on what's happening at the next 3 months. And the Koch Industries executives and the traders I interview just almost laugh at that. This is a company whose strategic horizon is based on 2 years, 5 years, sometimes even 10 years out. And what you see again and again is that this gave Koch the opportunity to exploit opportunities that other people were missing.
What was Koch Industries like when Charles and David Koch took it over from their father? What was the industry then?
So the industry then was much smaller and less coordinated than it is today. You know, Charles Koch tried not to work for the family company. He was born and raised in Wichita with 4 brothers. He had a very, what I would describe as an overbearing father named Fred Koch. Charles Koch tried to get out of that orbit. He went to the East Coast, but his dad pulled him back to work for the family company. And then his father, Fred Koch, died of a heart attack in November of 1967. Charles Koch was 32 years old at the time, and the corporation that he essentially inherited control of was this kind of motley collection. There was a large share of ownership in an oil refinery, There was a very large network of oil gathering infrastructures. Koch was the largest gatherer of crude oil in the United States, by which I mean it would go out to these oil wells, pick up the oil, take it to market. Then you had these engineering companies and some ranches. It was an unwieldy corporate machine, and almost instantaneously, Charles Koch surrounded himself with a small group of executives, and they began to restructure and redraw this corporate enterprise and turn it into a highly coordinated machine focused on growth.
I should mention here that later we'll get to the politics of the Koch brothers and Koch Industries, because they've done a lot of political work to make sure that there's no legislation inhibiting their goals. And that includes trying to prevent the passage of legislation that limits greenhouse gas emissions. So in order to create and build this huge collection of businesses owned by the Koch brothers, including just buying them through private equity, they created a veil of secrecy. You call it the corporate veil, to protect Koch Industries in case any one of these individual companies fails and goes into debt. So can you talk a little bit about that corporate veil, how it works and how it protects Koch Industries?
Yeah, this is vital to understanding how Koch really grew during the 2000s. That's when you saw this era of explosive growth. So around the year 2000, Koch Industries focused on building this kind of legal structure called a corporate veil. And the corporate veil is like a brick wall